to On the Grass, where I'm Harvey Kennedy. I'm a third-year football journalism student at the University of Derby, and I'm also joined alongside me by Josh.
Yep, I'm also a student on the course, second year, so it's a real privilege to be part of this podcast. Obviously joined by Peter today.
Yeah, for sure, and we've got senior lecturer, emphasis on senior, for Peter Wednesday.
Fair enough, yeah.
But
absolutely.
we are joined by the one, the end, as Josh touched on, Peter Drury. How are you doing, Pete?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Yes,
I only wish I was a student.
You don't. Up them pints are getting more expensive.
Yeah.
So.
It's still 66p.
I wish. Yeah, but I'm sure Josh will start us off with the first question for you.
Yeah, so we've got a little starter activity for you. 30 seconds, we're looking at the four corners model, part coaching, player development. So out of social, physical, technical and psychological, in terms of warm-ups and coaching, which one counted most for you as your time as a grassroots coach?
Oh, that's tough. You're giving me 30 seconds.
24.
I would pick between psychological and social, because for the most part, sport, I think, for young people is a social activity. And feeling a part of something, being in a team, learning to live with others, cooperate, that is, for the very great majority, the priority where sport's concerned.
That was so neat. That was fantastic. 25 seconds. Brilliant.
Well done. So we're just going to take you back now to your days when you keep teaching your kids grassroots level. What was that like? Did you enjoy that time?
It was some of the most fulfilling time I ever spent. And it made me do things outside of my natural orb, if you know what I mean. I've been lucky to work for a living in something that other people wouldn't recognise as work, if you know what I mean. I kind of don't live in the real world. I've never had to manage people. I've never had to deal with budgets. I've never had to deal with the day-to-day issues. I myself am an issue, you know what I mean. And so dealing, albeit as a volunteer, with kids from the age of 6 to 18, with their parents, with their issues, with their huge variety of ambitions, aspirations, be they huge or very humble, and helping them to be essentially happy within the space that we had was a, this sounds a bit highfalutin, but I really mean it, a really important part of my human development.
What type of manager were you? Were you aggressive? Were you trying to?
I certainly didn't set an example. In terms of, if you see me play, you know. What I hope I was an inclusive manager. I found some of the hardest issues around youth sport concern the massive variables in terms of talent, obviously, the need to involve everybody, and the kind of dilemma that often pits ambition against inclusion. You know, and so there are the nuts and bolts things around an under-9s game of football, around if I pick these 7, we'll win. Yeah. But these 7 have also paid their money. Yeah, they're a part of our club, and they've got to be involved. And if I leave him or her on the touchline shivering for 15 minutes, he or she is not going to want to come back next week. Yeah. And our job is to involve everybody. Yeah. And those, I think, are the biggest dilemmas still around youth sport now. And so the gradual streaming, obviously, into the best and the second best and the third best. These are all painful choices at the time, and they become very big in your head. And in fact, in retrospect, they become much too big. Partly because they could become much too big on occasions for parents who can take these choices very, very personally and can't see that actually it's better for Billy to play in the second team and have a really good time every Sunday morning than to be the one who's a little bit out of his depth amongst players who probably don't respect him to the same degree, and he can't impact on the football match. Because they all want him to be playing for Manchester United in England, and that ain't going to happen, I'm afraid. So there you are.
Can I jump in there, Harvey? Just ask. Did you have 3 sons playing, and did you manage all of their teams?
I didn't manage all of their teams. No, funnily enough, I reached the apex of my coaching career with my third son, and it was around him that I actually did the FA Level 1 training and did the whole thing properly and coached him up to the age of 10 or 12. And at that stage, actually, I had career issues, which meant that I wasn't available on Sundays and all that. So I stepped away, but continued to run the whole age group, which I had done all the way. So I wasn't specifically coaching a team. I was overseeing 4 or 5 teams and all of the political issues around those. Yeah.
Playing time's a really interesting one,
Yeah.
and now at Derbyshire FA, as in all county FAs, equal playing time is a massive thing.
Yes,
It's almost
yeah.
taken as read.
Was for
how,
me.
how was it as
Yeah,
well?
it was, and it was a really interesting thing, Pete, because I do understand, especially even at 7 years old, if you're the best player in the team and you're asked to come off for 10 minutes, deep down, even if you're a lovely, modest individual, you probably know you're the best player in the team. You know, even at that age,
Yeah.
and it must be a great frustration. And even if you're the 3rd best player in the team or the 4th best player in the team, you're thinking, it's better if he's on, and it's probably better if he's not. You know, and but I'm sorry, that's not the world we live in. And I felt the angst and sometimes the anger of parents, particularly, and sometimes the kids. What? What? You know, we're leading by 1 goal. There's 5 minutes to play, and you've taken our best player off. You know, and learning to deal with those issues is a really kind of enriching thing because of the pain around it, and learning how to manage the team. I mean, the best thing when they're very young. I don't know what the Derbyshire FA would say about this. And in a way, you shouldn't say it out loud because it would expose
say it
them.
out loud.
Well, what I'd say is, if you've got one little boy or girl who you know isn't probably up to the level, the best thing is to call them over and say, "Hey, Molly, you are my starting centre forward. You get out there, score me a goal, make Molly feel 150%. Absolutely get out there, and then Molly can have her time, and you never know, the ball might hit her knee and go in, and then she really does feel $1 million. But even if it doesn't, you've given her time. Her time ends with still a good chunk of the game to play, and then your best player goes on and scores you the winner. You know what I mean? That's the kind of perfect. But it's a case of finding a balance between inclusion, because you must never send a child away from their game of football, which they are there to enjoy, feeling that they're a waste of space, B, irrelevant, C, cold and miserable. What's the point? That's not what sport is. That's not what sport is. And we've got to learn with that.
Absolutely. And if you can give them those little, like you were saying about Molly, go and score me a goal. But, at my primary school, for example, there's some starters, and I might say to them, right, you've got your target in the next 15 minutes chunks is, can you touch the ball once in our half and once in their half? Can you make that? So would you set some of your development players individual tasks? Would you do flyby and talk to individuals?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you're making it sound, Pete, probably more technical than me, in the sense that I think it's just about talking to the human beings that they are, and making them feel special. That's all you want is your moment. I'm for instance, an horrendous golfer, but so you take away from an awful round of golf the one that you hit sweet and did go 200 yards down the middle because it was the only one, and so if you say that as a 50-something adult, think of a 6-year-old who just wants their friends and their sense of being someone and being in a place. And so that idea of figuratively putting your arm around a child and saying, you're really important to me. And what I want from you is to, as you say, achieve something, to do this, you see that's their best player. I don't want you to leave the side of their best player. Because and even if that sort of cynical man marking job.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, in a game of under sevens football is kind of neither here nor there.
Yeah.
To give that impression of mattering,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's people, children especially, need to feel that they matter.
I mean, you've seen the best players in the world.
Yeah.
How important do you think that sort of beginning at grassroots level, because many have come through that sort of youth level?
Everyone has.
Yeah, I mean,
everyone kicked
yeah.
their first ball sometime.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, you know, there are so many fabled stories of the greatest players who nearly didn't make it.
Yes,
who were, you know, Harry Kane was let go by Arsenal.
Yes, yeah.
Lionel Messi was too small. You know, Lionel Messi, who arguably is the greatest player there's ever been, was too small. And I suppose in that moment, might have felt, you know, but maybe he had a parent who said, hang on, I still think you're good enough, you know, or whatever, you know, found a way to do it. So everybody starts somewhere. And I think the job of the vast majority of community youth football coaches is to ensure enjoyment. It's absolutely about enjoying. And I struggle, and I mean this in a very real way, I struggle with the point where enjoyment hits ambition. And because ultimately, if you stuck to my blueprint, the England team wouldn't be good enough. You know, because ultimately you do have to strike out and say, okay, you are now heading for excellence. And it's no good me saying to you, I'm going to give you 25 minutes, even though I'm not, you know, if you're not good enough, you're not in the team. And that is a very difficult point that comes somewhere blurrily between the age of 14 and 17. And you know, that point is a very, very complex point. And I can't give you an answer. But there is one.
Well, speaking of grassroots coaches, from Peter Drury to the next up-and-coming coaches, we went to the Mickleham Sports Ground to hear from the latest coaches, and some of the most experienced ones sharing their knowledge. So just firstly, if you could give any up-and-coming coaches any advice, what would it be?
I'd probably say be yourself, let your own personality and values come out as a person into your coaching, but it's knowing your own players and what their strengths and weaknesses are to adapt any session to your players, not a session, and trying to make your players fit that session.
Have an open mind in the sense that you're almost like a blank canvas, willing to learn, and you learn from the kids, from the parents, from other coaches, and from the experience.
Watch other coaches, try and talk to as many coaches as possible.
Get as much information from as many people as you can. I coach a lot with disability footballers, and it's invalid to have those little ideas and little techniques that you can pick up and rob off other coaches.
Don't try to be something you're not, because whatever age the players are that you're coaching, they will find you out.
How important do you think this kind of scheme is as such to bring forward the next generation of coaches?
The more people you bring in, the bigger it's going to get. So I think you definitely need that unit in there to have that support. And I think if we've not got that, then I think people are going to struggle to want to stay and continue to do it.
Massively helping, because it goes in and around my uni course. So it doesn't just help us coaches, it helps us help other coaches, and then it makes it better for everyone. So I think it's massively important, yeah.
It's probably made me a better coach, one that I've sort of now reflect a little bit more, which is obviously is one of the main things in the coaching mentor, is a lot about reflection, and observing, so that's helped me.
I mean, I was fortunate when I started coaching, I was working alongside an experienced coach, so that really helped me. But in a lot of cases, a new team gets formed, two unsuspecting parents get dragged into carrying the balls and doing the coaching, and very often it's a case of, well, here's the balls, on you go, and having somebody to give them a bit of support, even if it's just as a sounding board, I think is invaluable.
It's tremendously important, especially for young coaches and coaches even at my age and stages. You're never too old or too young to learn something new and different off other people.
I found it really inspiring because there's nothing better than peer support. So for me, the first thing I noticed was the folks around the mentoring program supported each other. Very little questions, very little issues going on. You just ping it a message and the group are able to respond. But importantly, when we come together, there's so much learning happening, and that for me is so rewarding. Well, I think there's need for this because there are a lot of people who started like me with no kind of knowledge of the wider impact of what they do, but also knowing that there is a system, a support system. So a lot of coaches don't have a support mechanism.
Finally, what's been the most rewarding thing for you as a coach?
Meeting new people, meeting people from other places, just knowing that I'm going to be helping the next lot of coaches or even present coaches coming in.
Taking over as head coach at such a young age and the respect that you get from not only the kids but the parents and other managers that you come up against. Yeah.
I mean, the team I coach, I've been coaching 18 years now. It's the same team. Started at under 10 and it's now open age. Some of the original players are still there, and I think being on that journey with them and seeing them grow as people and as players is the reward.
Hi, I'm Tom, and it was lovely to hear from all the coaches at Mickleover. We hope you enjoyed that insert. And now going into Peter's career, I'll pass on to you, Josh.
Well, yeah, commentating, of course, the main thing. I'm just wondering, was there ever a point when you realised this is what I want to do? I want to commentate on the biggest games in the world?
Not really, no, because it's all just kind of happened by accident. You know, I suppose like a million kids then and now, I kind of had a pipe dream about it, like you guys. Like, you know, I loved sport and I watched and listened to it plenty, but it didn't really occur to me that it could happen for me. I knew absolutely I was never going to be able to play sport for a living because I was very, very average, to put it kindly. But I was always fascinated by how it worked. And when I was growing up, you know, radio was a very big thing because there was much less sport on or live football, certainly on the television than there is now. And I used to lock myself away and listen to the radio, you know, and listen to the great broadcasters of that time. And then step by step and lucky break by lucky break, you know, a sort of career fell into place for me.
I was wondering, obviously you spoke about, you know, a Leicester fan off camera, then, you know, the crazy moments in football where the unexpected happens. I was wondering how you kind of deal with that as a commentator. The World Cup springs to mind as well. So, you know, it was 2-0, everyone thought it was done, and then Mbappe arrived in. Yeah. How do you kind of deal with that kind of process?
I think that comes down largely to two very different things. One is preparation, and that means knowing that in terms of information, background, and so on, you are equipped for any circumstance. And that's what commentary preparation is, being equipped for whatever the game might throw at you in terms of history, statistics, and just knowledge of the players and so on. But the other, in those really big and exceptional moments, is really instinct. Just a willingness to trust, almost blindly, to trust yourself, to go with the moment and kind of let it happen. And those exceptional moments, strip away the commentary. The commentary is just a kind of reflection of them. It just mirrors them. They speak for themselves. You know, if Mbappe scores a hat-trick in the World Cup final, you know, that World Cup final, if somebody had scripted it beforehand and written all down and said, this is what's going to happen, you'd have said, that's stupid. You know, that's just a comic. To have Mbappe against Messi, one gets a hat-trick, the other wins it, you know, is just ridiculous, isn't it? And so those moments, as long as you're prepared, as long as you've got your head screwed on, should look after themselves.
Definitely. Have you got any other moments which spring to mind? Obviously not on that level, but in terms of that unknown and that kind of fact of, wow, and just like I said, you kind of just describe what's happening, you don't really have to think, which is probably a good thing. Yeah, I mean, one of the things people ask commentators, me, all of the guys and gals, is do you have words ready? You know, and my answer to that question is always the same. I have words ready up to kick-off and from the final whistle onwards. You know, so if somebody's going to lift the World Cup, you'd be stupid not to have something ready to say when they lift the World Cup. And when the teams come out of the tunnel and there's a team board there and the graphics out, of course you've got to be ready for that. But you would be foolish
to pre-imagine an event in the game. So you think, if Jones scores, this is what I'm going to say. Because when Jones scores, it might not be quite as you imagined it. In your imagination, Jones scored the goal to make it 1-0. And so you think, if he scores, I'm going to say this. But actually then Jones scores and they're still 2-1 down. And there's a completely different vibe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the ultimate example of that, obviously Martin Tyler, my friend and colleague, was very famous. But the famous Aguero goal. I did that Aguero goal for the World Feed, for sort of the global coverage. And I think we all turned up that day at Manchester City knowing that Man City only had to beat QPR to be the champions. You know, it was a given. Of course they were going to score. And of course they were going to win. And so if you had in your mind, when Aguero scores a winner, this is what I'm going to say, it would have fallen short, wouldn't it? It was nowhere near that moment.
Yeah.
And so to have a kind of pre-arranged set of words ready, a preconceived idea of what might happen, is to invite the accusation that it was pre-written, which is commentators don't like to think about themselves, but B, a real inauthenticity, you know, just a choice of words that doesn't reflect the moment. So ultimately, and it's a dangerous thing and it makes me feel butterflies now, I have butterflies every time, ultimately you have got to trust an instinct and just hope that, you know, in the knowledge that one day that instinct might let you down badly. And sometimes, of course, it doesn't necessarily go brilliantly well. You hope not to get it wrong, but it's not every time do you kind of nail it. Yeah. You think, you get back in the car after, you think, I could have done that better. You know, you often think, you know, the best lines occur to you in the car park, I can assure you. It's too late.
In terms of like preparation, you know, let's say the next game you're doing on a Super Sunday, when does your kind of week start in terms of, I don't know, getting the stats, that type of thing, and trying to work out, you know, key things about players? Let's say, you know, Salah scores his, you know, certain number of goals. Yeah,
it's obviously it varies week by week, but my working week is normally aimed towards 2 games, because I do a game on a Saturday for NBC for the American audience, and then for Sky on a Sunday now. Really it begins on Monday morning. So I spend normally a big-ish chunk of Monday watching back the weekend self-critically, and I absolutely rip into myself because, you know, I hate it when I repeat a word or get stuck on a phrase or make a mistake or whatever. So I you know, if I've overused the word one week, I bat it the next. And then I begin all of that statistical preparation, and over the course of a 5-day midweek, I'm just about ready for 2 days of the weekend. And of course that can be complicated if I'm doing, you know, Arsenal and they've got a Champions League game on the Wednesday. Then there's only so much the game I can prepare before they've played again and all the stats have changed. But there is a certain amount you can prepare, because if Arsenal are playing Manchester United, all of the history of that fixture remains unchanged. There are certain givens that are always there. So you can do that chunk of it, but the sort of player-by-player stuff, which is a long graft, you can't really begin until they've played their last game before that one.
And with the sort of technique with commentary, some commentators, they say a big goal scored, they seem to, the goal goes in, the crowd are cheering, and there's a little moment of silence before they say something. What are your thoughts on that? Do you enjoy that?
Oh, I do, yeah. I think that it's important to remember that the soundtrack of a football match is not the commentator, it's the supporters. That's the great thing. And so, listen, we've all been guilty, and I'm not having a go at others or indeed excusing myself, but I think the idea that what you've got to say in that moment overrides 50,000 people creating a wonderful noise is wrong. And it takes a long time to learn that, especially actually if you've come out of radio. You know, a lot of television commentators did do radio first, where obviously you do have to keep talking, because that's your job, and without you on the radio, there's nothing. But to shout, to me, the cleanest, loveliest goals are shout the name, maybe a line at most, and then 6, 7, 8 seconds of the raw, because that's the best bit. And learning when not to talk is as important as learning when to talk.
Yeah.
Well, has there been any stadiums that you've been to and you really like soaked up the atmosphere and you thought, well, wow, this is unbelievable?
Yeah, I don't think I ever stopped being a child, actually, and I mean that in a positive way.
Yeah.
It excites me still to walk up to a stadium and to, an evening game, and you walk up and the floodlights are on, and that thing of just walking up to the ground, and you can remember those times when you go as a fan and you walk up through the thing and you get to the top of the steps, you look down and there's the perfect green grass, and that still excites me. And I suppose the day it doesn't is the day it might be time to say stop. Because if you're not excited, if you're not thrilled by the prospect of having, the best seat in the house to watch elite sport and be paid for it, I mean, let's face it, that's why you're all here. Then you shouldn't be doing it, because there are plenty of other people who do want to do it. And there are certain grounds where you feel an immense sense of privilege. It's a massively privileged thing to do, to turn up at Anfield and Old Trafford and the Emirates and the Etihad, Stamford Bridge, and I'm not in the Champions League at the moment, but to do the travelling, to do the European trips, and to go to these glorious continental stadia, you get there and you think, and it remains for me a sort of pinch me moment. Really? So yes, I absolutely try to drink it in every time when I can.
Is that why you'd say you're so critical sometimes of your work, trying to listen back to your commentary, because you're just so passionate, you just want it to be the best you can?
I want it to be good, I want it to be good, because hey, it should be. It should be. There are gazillions of people who'd love to do what I'm doing, and so if I can't deliver properly, then I ought to be annoyed at myself. I mean, yes, it's such a fortunate position to be in, that you should never ever take it for granted. And there are plenty of flaws in me, believe you me, plenty. But one thing I would say of myself is that I don't take it for granted. I'm genuinely grateful and try to allow that to be reflected in what I do. I'm excited to be at the game. And I say to people within our industry, that I remember a young commentator saying to me one time on the last day of the season that they were going to go and cover the game between the team that's 12th and 13th, nothing on it. That there's always 2 or 3, aren't there, on the last day of the season with nothing. And he said, I can't get up for this. I said, by the way, 40,000 people are paying 50 quid each. And that game matters to them. If you can't get up for it, there's a narrative in this game. The manager might be playing for his job. The 2 or 3 of them are paying for their contracts. It matters to people, and it matters to both sets of fans. Whoever you support, they might have a dead rubber on the last day of the season, and still the first result you look for will be your team. There could be the title decider, the mighty game, but you're looking for your team. And so, as the commentator, indeed any reporter, you turn up at that game, that's your game. And it's your game to articulate, because there's an audience for that. Who only care about their game.
Is that all the questions done?
Is it?
It is.
We could keep talking forever, couldn't we?
We'll tell you what, we'll finish on this quick game. It's this or that. I have 6 questions for you, and you just got to say which one you prefer. So, starting off, VAR or no VAR?
No VAR.
Am I right in saying you're a Watford fan?
Yeah. Yes.
Would you rather Watford win a trophy or England win a trophy?
There was a moment when Troy Deeney was going to be England's centre forward, and then he could have scored the World Cup final winner. So I will say England.
And would you prefer co-commentary or solo?
Oh, I'd always rather have a co-commentator.
Yeah. And final one, 3 o'clock afternoon games or night games under the floodlights?
I think floodlights.
Got to be, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, Peter, thank you very much for joining
Thank
us on
you.
the Grass. Really
Thank you,
appreciate
guys.
it.
Thank you.
We've learned all about Peter's grassroots development as well. We've learned all about his commentary and masterclass in commentary. So thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.